through 34 of the chapters pretty briefly, but again, if you guys have any questions, let me know. So, rule 1, the game. The game of golf consists of playing a ball with a club from the teeing ground into the hole by a stroke or successive strokes in accordance with the rules. Really, I mean, it makes sense when you're out there playing, but this is just how the USGA defines it. They cover all the bases. So, again, that's golf. 2 kind of general principles that are good to kind of play by. Play the course as you find it, and play the ball as it lies. So unless the rules say otherwise, that's just something good to keep in mind. All right. So as you guys know, I'm sure, there's kind of 2 different general forms of play. There's match play and stroke play. So match play is when one side plays against another side over a stipulated round unless otherwise declared or decreed by the committee. So when you're reading the rules, this is just something, a little tidbit, I guess, but if you're ever reading the rule book and it says opponent, they're talking about match play. If it says competitor, it's stroke play. So just so you guys are clear, opponent is match play and stroke play is competitor. Okay, so when you're playing stroke play, so that's when you're playing against everybody in the field, not just the person, your opponent. If you guys ever had a doubtful situation, there's not a rules official around, if you ever come into that situation again, this is here to help you. Rule 3-3. So if you're playing and you come to a situation where you don't know what to do, like let's say your ball is in a huge thing of mud, and you're like, I don't know if I can play this or not, or if I'm allowed relief, and there's no rules official around, you're allowed to play Rule 3-3, and you're never going to be penalized for playing Rule 3-3, so keep that in mind. If your intentions are just to figure out if you're allowed to do this or not, you're not going to be penalized. So you're allowed to play a second ball, and I'll kind of detail how you do that. So after the situation is called, which cause the doubt has arisen, the competitor should, before taking further action, so my ball lands in the mud. Before I do anything else, this is what I need to do. I need to announce to my marker or fellow competitor my intention to invoke this rule. So I need to say, I'm not sure what I'm doing. I'm going to play 2 balls. Just say it like that. Next, and then I need to say which ball I want to score with, if the rules permit. So I need to say, generally you're going to say I like to score with the second ball if it's a better situation. So you're just going to announce and say I like to score with the second ball. That way when the committee member gets there, they can kind of go through all the steps with you. And if that ball is played in accordance with the rules, then you'll score with that ball. So once the rules official get there, you must report the facts to the committee before you turn your scorecard, or else you're disqualified. So that's the only time you can't get in trouble, is if you don't tell a rules official or someone on the committee that you did that. So just keep that in mind. If you ever have the question, you're not going to be penalized for playing the ball unless you don't say anything to a rules official afterwards. You guys all good with 3-3? Yes, ma'am.
From that point forward, do you continue to hit both balls?
Yes, great question.
Just for that hole, though?
Just for that hole, yep. So you continue to play both balls. There are some decisions on it as far as if you don't finish out with one ball, but it's never a good idea. So just make sure you always hole out with both balls if you decide to invoke that. So, yeah, it's good. All right, Rule 4, club. So just keep that in mind. Remember that.
I don't
14.
mind if you have 140.
Yeah, I remember that one. Rule 4. Writer's cat.
Here, I'll restart this. Sorry. It's kind of quiet, sorry.
Final round co-leader Ian Woosnam's frustration bubbled over at the second tee when he discovered he was carrying 15 clubs in his bag. According to Rule 4-4, the player may not start a round with more than 14. The penalty is 2 strokes for each hole, with a maximum of 4 strokes per round. And the player must declare the extra.
Everybody remembers this. Back in 2001,
when he teed off, when he was on the practice range, he had two drivers that he was trying to decide which one he was going to use that day. And I think when they got to the second or third hole,
Second.
second hole, his caddy noticed it, and at the time he was in contention, so he'll finish the rest of the story for you.
Yeah, so if you have more than 14 clubs, it's 2 strokes for every hole that you have that extra club. But the maximum is only 4 strokes. So even if you carry it for 6 holes, the most you can get is 4 strokes. But in this case, like he was saying, is that the ball, they found out that he had an extra club between the play of 2 holes. So between 1 and 2. So he hadn't technically started play the second hole, so he thankfully only got a 2-stroke penalty versus the 4 strokes, which he would have had if he would have teed off. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So if somebody wanted that 15th club in the worst way, could they go into the round taking a 4-shot penalty?
They could, yeah. Now, I'm not sure, there might be a decision, I'm not positive about that. If they know that they have the 15 clubs and then play, that could be disqualification, but I'm not positive, I have to look that up.
Yeah, that's where it is.
Okay, so the ball the player uses must conform to requirements specified in Appendix 3. And really in Appendix 3, it just has some lists of, it can't unduly change the flight of the ball and things like that. So nothing you guys really need to know. If the manufacturer makes it, it's most likely going to conform to the rules. So just in Appendix 3, there's a list of things. All right, time of starting in groups. Time of starting, the player must start at the time established by the committee. A breach for this is a disqualification. So if your tee time is 8 o'clock and you show up at 8 o'clock in 1 second, you're done. You can just go back home. So if you're ever playing a tournament, make sure you're there on time. Now, in all the tournaments that we run, we always invoke the notes, which says that if you're there within 5 minutes, so you show up at 8:02, you're not disqualified, but just a 2-stroke penalty. Okay? So a little lenient, that way if something happens, a little more leeway for the player. But just keep that in mind. Think of it as disqualification, that way you're there on time and you're never going to get the penalty or disqualified. All right, and same thing, disqualification. If you decide to change groups during the round, that's not allowed. So you need to play in the group that you're assigned for the entire round, unless the committee member comes by and says you need to go to a different group. So in a couple of tournaments I've run, there's been players that have disqualified, or not disqualified, but withdrawn because of injuries or something like that. And so it's just one player. So we need to take someone from another group so that way he has a marker. So unless something like that arises, you have to stay in the group assigned by the committee. All right, the scorecard. The only thing that the player is responsible for is the hole by hole. So it doesn't matter if the addition's wrong, they just are responsible for the hole by hole. So as you're going through and keeping score, just make sure that every hole is correct. And if you do that, you're going to be fine. The committee takes care of the scoring and everything else. Now this is kind of an interesting situation where Harrington's scorecard is signed by Jamie Spence as the marker and Michael Campbell as the competitor. Now, in this case, you would think it would be disqualification, but as long as this is the scorecard for Michael Campbell and not Harrington, then he's okay. Because in golf, like let's say it's raining out a lot and your scorecard gets ruined, the committee's allowed to give you a different scorecard to finish the round to keep track of the score. So it's basically the same thing. Even though the name's wrong, as long as all the scores are correct for Michael Campbell and he signed it, then he's fine. They can change the name at the top. Now, I'm not sure why it happened, but if this were Harrington's scorecard and someone else signed it, then that'd be disqualification. So just make sure your scorecard has your signature and the correct scores for each hole. Otherwise, disqualification. You guys good with that? Okay. All right, now here's a situation from the 1968 Masters where Roberto De Vincenzo posted a 4 instead of the 3 he actually posted, or he actually scored at hole 17. Now, this is different because if you sign for a lower score, so let's say I'm playing and I actually score a 3, but I write down a 2 for a hole, and I sign my scorecard and turn it in, I'm disqualified for signing for a lower score, okay? But in this case, since he actually scored a 4, or he actually scored a 3 when you wrote down a 4, you aren't disqualified, but you're just stuck with that score. And so in this case, he lost the championship by 1 stroke. So, yeah, pretty rough. When you're going through, you want to make sure that every hole is correct. And I see it a ton of times where a kid will come in just frustrated about the round, won't even look over it, sign it, and he walks out. And we do our best to make sure they stay there so that they understand that this needs to be correct before they storm off, but sometimes you just can't help it with kids' emotions and they leave without ever really looking at it. So this is always an important thing to know that if you sign for a lower score, you're disqualified. Higher score, unfortunately you're stuck with it, but you're still in the competition.